All right, we're going to talk about where you control the attributes or characteristics of 2D objects and lines. So we're going to start by grabbing our rectangle tool here. I'm going to click on that. And up here, you're going to see these settings that we've talked about of how do you want to draw your triangle. I'm just going to go corner to corner here. But I'm going to start drawing, and I'm going to draw a rectangle and get to maybe a round number of some kind. Sure, that's like 10, and boom. Okay, so there's my rectangle. I drug it out, and you saw how long it took me to get that precisely dropped with that specific measurement of 10 feet wide and 8 feet tall. Another way I could do that, I'm going to hit delete for a moment, is I could just draw a shape, and then I could say, I could go over here to the object info panel, and I could change that by making the width. I can enter 10 feet and hit tab, and you see the shape change. And the height would be 8 feet, and I hit tab or enter, and the shape changes. There's one more way to do this, which we could double click on the square tool. And the first thing I want to do is I'm just dropping it. You don't need to worry about class and layer yet. We will talk about those soon. But here, the width, I'm going to go ahead and put in 10 foot, 0 inches, and our height was 8 foot, 0 inches. And then right down here is what's called your bounding box. And it is basically at what point or where will this shape be inserted. So this shape, I will insert it when I click, and that will be the top left corner of the shape. Or I could change it so that I control this shape by the center, and then it's going to tell me what the center is right there. But I'm going to go ahead and drop it in its position at next click, and we don't need to rotate it or anything special, so I'm going to say OK, and then I'm going to go right in here and see, now I have already my pre-made shape, and I'm just going to drop it in. Now, as you can see, this shape has a fill. Where do we change that? Well, if you look over here in the attributes panel here, these are the attributes of your shape. So you can see the fill is solid right now, and it's solid white. So if I wanted to change the color, I could click on this color, and then I could make a custom color, or I could go and use classic Vectorworks colors or other options in here if I wanted to change the color. I'm not going to change the color right now, but you would just click on one of those colors. But I'm going to take the fill away. So right now this drop-down menu says that it's a solid fill. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to select none, even though you could do a pattern, hatch, tile, gradient, or you can even put an image inside of there. But I'm going to say no fill for right now. So now we just have the shape. So now when we move on to draw the next thing, or sometimes when you select tools, it's very important in Vectorworks to make sure that you are working with whatever object you want to be working with, or if you're getting ready to work with another object and you're setting up because you want it to be a different line weight or a different color in a specific layer, you can set those attributes and certain attributes by layer or class. But we're not going to talk about that at the moment. However, you do want to make sure before you move on to your next function that whatever you do may impact whatever you have selected. So we need to deselect it and make sure that we are not augmenting or changing anything that we have control of at the moment. So there are a couple ways I could do that. To deselect the object, I could hit escape a couple times and it deselects. Or if I really wanted to, can reselect this object, but I could just click anywhere. The problem being, if I still have the square tool and I click, now it wants to draw another square. Okay, so what I would do is I would go over here and grab the selection tool. Another thing you can pay attention to is you see where it says selection tool and in parentheses it has an X. I could also, while I'm out here, you see I still have the square tool and you can't see me press X on my keyboard, but when I press X, I now change to a cursor so I can select or deselect. So if this was selected, I would just click somewhere in a blank space and that would deselect it. So now, in order to illustrate some other things, I'm going to go ahead and drop a couple other shapes in here. Here's a circle, and I'm going to make sure that it is no longer filled. It has no fill. And then I'm going to draw a line over here. There you go. Okay. Now, I talked just a few moments ago about the fills of those shapes, and there are certainly drafting standards that we are going to pay attention to, and drafting standards that you will receive information on from USITT, which is the United States Institute for Theater Technology, and they put out a document that governs loosely what line weights we should use for everything, what kind of fills, kind of a general practice of how we should look at drawings and a standard way of interpretation. So if we wanted to fill this rectangle, I could fill it with a color, like I said. I could go here and I could select red, and now it's filled with red. Here, right below the red, you see the opacity box, and you can set the opacity to anything, and sometimes you need to do this because you need to see what's beneath it. There are multiple reasons why you could do this, and as you create your own workflow, you may find moments where you find it handy to change the opacity of a certain shape, line, object, anything like that. But right now, this opacity controls the fill opacity. So we see we're at 50% opacity with the red. All right, so the pen down here is solid, and it's solid black. It's around that edge, but before we take a look at it, I'm going to show you this here. This is the line weight. So I'm going to go ahead and just thicken up that line. I'm going to make it a 1-point line, and I wasn't selected, so it didn't happen. I'm going to go here back again, make that a 1-point line. Now it's a little thicker that we can see it. I'm going to keep it selected because the pen can be solid, pattern, or a line type. As you know, in theater, we distinguish line types by dashes, long dashes and short dashes, and there's center lines and plaster lines and other kind of lines that we use. But right now, I'm just going to keep this a solid line, and then I see the opacity here. I could change the opacity on this as well to 50%, and now you see that that looks a little more gray and it has some opacity. Now, we want to talk about markers. This line right here, if it needs markers or arrows that indicate what we should direct our attention to, these are what these controls are down here. There's a selector for either end of the line. So the beginning of the line can get a marker where we started the line. So when I say beginning of the line, I mean where we first clicked to start drawing the line. Over here, I'm going to switch this up, and I'm going to put a dot on the other end, just to illustrate one thing. This is selected. There are times where I may need a dot at one end to anchor where something specific is, and then to call out some information elsewhere where it's easier to read, so the arrow directs me to where that information is. However, in between right here, you see this marker link toggle. It is off right now, but if I click this, what it's going to do, it should take the beginning, the first marker I used, and force it upon the other end, like it did. But now, if I change either end of this marker, it's going to change both ends. Okay, so that's kind of your lines and your markers. Now, if you wanted that to be larger, there are certainly plenty of times with drawings that you need to make your markers a little larger. You can go here to custom, and there are various ways that you can control that thickness, but you see its arrow, its fill is with the line color, it's flat. Here the angle is 15 degrees, the angle of the arrow. The length is there. But if I want the length to be a little longer, it looks like it's 0.125. I think that's like 1/8 of an inch. I could certainly do 0.25. And we see that the arrow gets a little larger when I go to 0.25. Okay? And then I can change its thickness. So if I just need to call out one side of the arrow or use both sides of the arrow, or if it needs to flip around for whatever reason, which I don't find myself using this function very often or at all really, but you may. Everybody drafts differently. Then the thickness options here, we could use the line thickness, but we haven't really set a line thickness by class or layer yet, so we can certainly revisit that later. But here you can custom thickness, and right now it's at 0.05 millimeters, and we're just going to leave it there and click OK. Now, it only changed the marker at this end. But if I have this selected and I link it, I think, boop, the marker on the other end changes as well. So you can certainly customize those arrows. The second thing I want to talk about is over here. Now that it's blank, it's called the Object Info palette, and right now it's going to deal with a shape, but later on it can deal with lighting instruments and lines. Anything. It's going to give you details about whatever is selected. So I have our original rectangle selected, and you can see here it's class and layer. It's going to tell you where these things reside. Like I said, we will talk about classes and layers and drawing organization at another time. Here's the plane you're working on, whether you want to work on layer. You don't have any other planes at the moment, but in the future you will. And then here we see the width is 10 feet, the height is 8 feet. Here's our boundary box telling us it was inserted on center, meaning that little reference point right there in the center. And then this tells us the coordinates of where it exists in the drawing, because I did not draw on that perfect axis of like 0, 0, and 0, 0. However, if we wanted to put it there, we could. We could boop, and then it will, right here, your X and Y coordinates go to 0 because the drop point was at 0. If I move my boundary box to here, to the top left corner, now it's going to tell me where that point exists in the drawing. But I'm going to go back to center, and now it's at 0, 0. I'm going to go ahead and drag our circle over here a little bit so things are a little easier to look at. What else do we have in here? You can rotate the shape. So if I wanted to rotate the shape, I could say 90 and turn it that way. Or I could do some, 19 degrees and turn it on its side. I could do a lot of different things. Could rotate it. Then this tells you the ratio of like length to width. The perimeter, it's 36-foot perimeter all the way around this shape, and it's about 80 square feet of space. And that's about all of the info you will have for a closed shape. If we select this line, then we see here we basically have the length, the angle, its X and Y coordinates of where it is. Then you have kind of a boundary box thing going on here of where you could insert the line and what that means. You can also click here. The show direction box will indicate in which direction you drew the line. I think that's about all we're going to cover now. We've looked at the shape and line attributes, and then we touched on the object info palette for the shape and line. We will certainly revisit these things as we do other functions as we move through class, but for now, this should be kind of some basic information to get you started moving forward.